This video is going to be about me. If you don't care about me, then you can go away. I was born to a family of 5. I had 2 older sisters and 2 younger brothers. And I was born to a military family. And we lived in Colorado, then moved to Kansas, then to Texas, then to California, where I basically still am. When I left the house, I kind of stayed in the area. I am 1/16th Negro, 1/16th African American, whatever you want to call them, black. Most people don't notice it until I tell them it. Then they look at my nose and they go, "Oh, I can kind of see it." I think they're just kind of they're doing what's called matricing. They're trying to see it since I told them about it, but that's really all it is. I am a queer. I am a faggot. I am gay. I am also mildly autistic. And it's usually not a problem until I'm in high-pressure social situations. If I'm in high-pressure social situations, I'll sometimes get panicky and sometimes problems with that. So yeah. What else? Want to know about my political development? Probably when I was between 10 and 12. I know the progression, but I don't remember the precise years. But I started off as a fundie. And my political views, my views on government, were basically influenced by what I heard my preacher say, what I thought was in the Bible, and what I had read mainly from the book of Revelations. And I believe that the state should try to do what is ordained by the Bible. What is most that the state should try to enforce what is said in the Bible as much as possible. I wasn't able to explain it in those terms, but that's basically what I believed. Then, probably when I was either 12 or 13, I was in the 8th grade. Became an atheist, and immediately became a Marxist. I became an atheist and kind of read this little book from bookstore. It wasn't a book. It was more like a little pamphlet. It was the Communist Manifesto, and I read that, and I thought it was very riveting. And I was kind of an atheist at the same time, so my mind was in this malleable state. So I basically became a Marxist, and then tried to read up on Marxism, and had a very hard time understanding the theory. I knew about the labor theory of value, and I knew about the economic laws, the idea of economic laws being malleable, and that's really important because economic laws are malleable, and basically a blank slate nature of man, which is that man can be changed to overcome the incentive problem of communism. That was basically Marxism to me. The specifics of the labor theory of value I didn't really get into, but my concern was that communism was possible because man was a blank slate. You could change him, and he would willingly work for the collective. And what else? And that profit was exploitation in some way. I didn't really think that much through. I wasn't too big on profit as exploitation. I was more so thinking of communism as a great thing that could occur, if you just changed what people valued. So I was that. Then I kind of drifted towards sort of more of a free market approach. After when I was a Marxist, I then started to read world atlases a lot, and just reading the correlation. I mean, this is before the Index of Economic Freedom from the Heritage Foundation, but it just popped out at me. It was so overwhelming everywhere that economic freedom led to wealth, and I began to support free markets, just kind of from what I had read in atlases, and I had read a little bit. Oh, another thing, I would spend all day at the library because our house was a mess. Was a madhouse. People constantly doing anything. You had very little privacy. High levels of respect for private property, though, right? No one ever took my stuff, and I respected their property as well. There's very solid property rights, so that was good, but it was kind of crazy. And so I would just spend days at the library just reading atlases and reading stuff. And at this point, I became, when I was 14, when was this? Must have been the middle of the Bush presidency. I was a neoconservative. In the sense, and in a true theoretical sense, not like some Republican who just kind of reflexively supports the Republican line. No, I was a true believer in using war to spread democracy. Right? I didn't, I didn't really care about quote unquote terrorism or weapons of mass destruction or anything like that. No, I supported the wars because they spread democracy around the world, and I thought democracy was, the greatest thing that there could be. I was a true believer in democracy, and as a true believer in democracy, I thought that people should be given this wonderful gift of democracy. And even if at first they were culturally predisposed to hate it, if it was imposed upon them, eventually they would like it, because democracy is great. Right? That was my general belief, and so I was a true believer neoconservative. Then I stopped believing in that. I stopped believing. Well, first I had kind of a fallout of with democracy. And I started to, it was really simple, I just started to think about democracy critically and about a lot of the problems with democracy, at which point I stopped being a neocon. But I didn't really know what I was. I saw democracy as kind of bad, but I didn't really have any alternative ideas. So I was kind of in this, nothing state until I started reading about how people self-segregated and how homogenous communities were happiest. People who are around people like them tend to be happiest. They tend to have the most civic pride and stuff like that. And so I became what you would call an omni-separatist. That is, anyone should be allowed to separate and form their state based on who they want to associate with, and form a state based on whatever form of government they like. You could think of it as a form of voluntary statism. And I also believe that the races would generally go along with their own, with wherever they wanted to go as well. And so, in addition to supporting, basically supported every nationalism, and that includes white nationalism. Okay? So, and that includes black nationalism and Latino nationalism. So I will say, yes, I was a white nationalist. Okay, but I was also a black nationalist and a Latino nationalist. It's not so much that people who say I was a white nationalist are lying, it's just that they don't know the rest of it. Okay, yeah. And I still believe that would be better, that would be preferable to what exists today. The reason you had all these conflicts in Yugoslavia, for example, was because they were forced under a single state for so long. And the dominant group in there, who I believe the Serbs, would use their position and would kind of screw over the other populations. Another example you had was Nazi Germany conquering Yugoslavia, and they enlisted the Muslim Bosnians, I think, to exterminate some other group. If it wasn't that, it was some other group that the Nazis enlisted to exterminate some other groups, and that led to bad blood, which led to revenge wars later on. And all these things came from these groups being forced into the same units. Bad blood comes from people not being able to go off to where they want. And most people don't support war if they really know what it's about. I think if people were fully informed that there would never be war. So if you had all these various nations, there wouldn't be war if they knew what exactly their government was doing, all that stuff. It's usually what happens is that they're fooled. For example, the Germans under Hitler were fooled into believing that the Poles were massacring the Germans in Poland. That's why they supported the war. Because they believe believed wrongly that the Poles were doing horrible things to the Germans. Anyway, and so I supported that. Then I read up about Dunbar's number, about 150 people that you can conceptualize as actually being people, and so I went from this kind of poly-nationalist at kind of a higher state level to an idea of, well, what we should do, it's not so much that we should support the idea of the nation state and having the most organic, the most ideal nation state. What we should focus on is having as much government powers devolved to the local level as possible. Because when you have it at the local level as possible, this is where people willingly work for each other. And this was actually somewhat influenced by my experience on mission trips. Because I would go on these mission trips and we would all work kind of like in a communist fashion. And we all did it willingly. And it was really... it was one of the best times of my life. Even though if you looked at it objectively, we were sleeping in... Our sleeping conditions were questionable. The food we ate was questionable. We were all working at least 8 hours a day, usually more. Doing all sorts of tasks, doing new tasks every day. So you couldn't get into a groove really. You'd be building houses one day, you'd be cleaning out poop you'd be cleaning out soup kitchens another day. You'd be cleaning up trash from the side of the road another day. So every day you'd be doing something, right? So doing something different just about. So it was a lot of hard work, but it was a magical time for me. It was the planets aligned for me, and I really loved those experiences. And we all became amazingly good friends. And coming back to reality after being on the mission trips was kind of a letdown, I would say, 'cause it was kind of like coming back to the cold reality away from the dream world of the mission trip. And I came to the conclusion that that's what should be done. But I didn't really know how to apply it politically until I heard of Dunbar's number, and I made the connection to those mission trips in the past, and I was like, that is it. That is what needs to be done. That we need to somehow find a way to devolve government to that level of the organic communism. If we can devolve it down to the organic communism, then that will be just super duper awesome. I wasn't really thinking in terms of it producing greater material abundance, but people, as much as you can devolve government down to that level as possible, the better government will be, and you can have voluntary socialism, and socialism will come about, but it won't have to be forced upon people who don't want it. It won't involve Group A voting themselves the resources of Group B, any of those problems with democracy, because it'll all be down to the organic prime unit, right? And so, at this time, I call myself a confederal socialist, right? Because you confederate powers down to as local a level as practicable. But then, after this, I finally the breaking point of the state after this was when I came to the conclusion that you don't even need to prescribe any of this. That people will form these neighborhoods, form these units on their own, to the extent that they want to. If they don't want to, that is what they will do. Especially if they live in bigger cities or something like that, people will do what they do. But it's my belief that in a stateless society, people will gravitate towards these association clusters of about 150 more and more. Especially when you decentralize government programs, you decentralize welfare and law and and police and all the public services and stuff. And what that'll do is that'll force people to kind of bind together in these natural, organically communistic units. And I say this, and a lot of people think I'm crazy, but and maybe I am a madman, but I have no doubt that that's what will happen. I am sure of it that it will happen, as are the anarcho-communists who think so, who I hate. I hate them, even though our predictions are kind of not exactly the same. They have see, they still think profit is exploitative, and they put a lot of emphasis on worker-owned firms. I have nothing against worker-owned firms. I just don't think they'll dominate the market. I mean, worker-owned firms is kind of an improper term because the capitalist is a worker, but I think there will be some worker-owned firms, especially for very skilled professionals like doctors. Doctors will get together and form like these co-op hospitals and stuff. But in terms of like, for example, McDonald's, I think McDonald's will always be a hierarchical firm. Anyway, that's kind of a tangent. But yeah, that was kind of my intellectual progression. How I went from a fundamentalist a state, the idea that the state should enforce the will of God, to a anti-statist. Basically spanning the whole gamut of political positions. So that's who I am. That is what I think. What about race? Race is actually kind of like this secondary thing that's kind of over here. A lot of people think that it's like integral to what I think, but it's not. I kind of get amped up about it because it just seems so obvious to me. And what I want to do here, I don't think I was able to explain in the debate with the skeptical heretic. And, you can blame me. I did not do very well in the debate. I got panicked. I had a hard time following his arguments. I had a hard time following him. So maybe I'm just too slow that I can't keep up. Well, okay. So all I want to do here is say what my views on race are. As I said in the debate, if people follow, and Skeptical Heretic kept saying this as though it was like some admission of defeat. But the thing is, I don't see race as like these concrete blocks. I don't try to reify race. I view like humans as having this large continuum of genetic diversity, and I don't see there as being like any clear point where one race ends and one race begins. I view it as kind of a flow of genetic diversity. And you can kind of put some mark out, say, this guy looks more African, or this guy, I don't know what this looks kind of like an African, kind of like a mix between, and so there's all these gradients and stuff like that. And they obviously have genetic differences. And I brought up the thing about DTM BP1 just to point out that you only need variations on a single gene to have profound differences. So even if you could say that, well, the average person classified as European has more in common with the average African than another European. That is, there's more variation within groups than between them. That really doesn't matter because the averages are still different. And that's what is politically relevant. Because even if there is more variation in IQ within groups than between them, the averages are still different from each other, and so that's going to result in different average outcomes of each of these groups. Whether or not you think that the genetic distance between these points on the human gradient constitute separate races is not particularly relevant. All that matters is that they're going to earn different incomes on these different points. Yeah. So they're going to earn different incomes on these different points, assuming that there's difference in innate income earning ability, and that is what I think, and a few reasons I think this, and they all kind of center around IQ. So and of course we know that the IQ of people classified as blacks are typically around 85 versus people classified as whites are typically around 100. And of course, if you control for IQ, the income differences wash out quite a bit. So the question is, like, what's the cause of this IQ difference? Well, there are a few reasons why I think it's genetic. It's primarily genetic. One is subtest heritability. On the more heritable subtests of the IQ tests, that's where you see the biggest racial gaps, right? If the racial gaps were a product of environment, you would expect to see the racial gaps highest on the subtests that are the most influenced by environment. But in fact, but you see the opposite. You see the racial gaps highest on the subtests that appear to be the most influenced by genetics. You also see the IQ gap widening with age. And of course, I talked about this about gene amplification. You know, as you get older, your features tend to get darker. There's always examples of little kids they're blonde as little kids. As they get older, their hair gets darker. Or if you've ever seen a black newborn, they have surprisingly light skin. As they get older, their skin gets darker as those genes become more and more expressed. So early on, there's a great degree of parity, and that's another piece of evidence that because as genes get more and more expressed, the IQ gaps get wider and wider between these populations. Now, whether or not you want to call these populations races is not germane to the point. There are two separate populations. Let me put it this way: you can take, let's imagine, let's do a thought, and it doesn't even have to be blacks and whites. Like you can take some white people with an average IQ of 120 and some white people with an average IQ of 80, and you can make the same kind of arguments. You can look at the subtest heritability, and you can point out that the difference in IQ scores between this group of white people and that group of white people is genetic. Okay, you can do it between any arbitrary group you want to define. Okay, and so the reason I talk about quote unquote blacks or people of African evolutionary origin or whatever. I mean, of course, we're all of African evolutionary origin because humans came out of Africa, but the reason I talk about that is because that's the most politically relevant. Right? People don't talk about the English American and German American income gap. They talk about the black-white income gap, and so that's why I focus on these groups. And of course, yeah, I mean these groups are socially constructed and socially divided. And there's not really strict divisions between the races. And I don't have any problem with people, race mixing or anything. I'm not a racial nationalist. I wasn't even when I was, kind of like this omni-separatist. I wasn't that big on racial nationalism in a prescriptive sense. It was just my belief that there seemed to be a lot of people who want to do it. There seemed to be a lot of people who secretly want to do it but don't say they want to do it. And so, I mean, people should just be allowed to go where they want to go. And the idea that these people are going to go to war with each other kind of ignores how states have lied to their populations to get them into war. So I think the fear that they're going to go to war is generally unfounded. So yeah, that's anything else I want to say about myself. That's well, I think that there's one more piece. What did I talk about? I talked about subtest heritability, gene amplification. Oh, you can also look at the Minnesota Transracial Adoption Study. It was supposed to be a study that put the final nail in the hereditary coffin. It has ended up being the best piece of evidence for hereditarianism. So yeah, that's really all I wanted to say. So I just wanted to say that here because I don't think people who watch the debate really could decipher my position, and I blame that. I blame that on two people. I blame that on the skeptical heretic for constantly interrupting me and making it impossible for me to state my position, but I also blame it on myself for not having been able to kind of burn through that, or be able to trudge through the skeptical heretics' objections and still make that point. And also, but the thing is, like, if I did it again, I don't think I could, because I'm not a very good debater. When I get in a debate, I kind of get scared. I seize up. So the thing is, I thought that I don't know what I was thinking. I thought that it wouldn't matter somehow, that I would just kind of be able that the skeptical heretic would be quiet and let me speak. But I mean, obviously that didn't happen, and I wasn't able to you know take control of my half of the debate. So, all right, that's all I wanted to say here.